I'm not on Twitter anymore, if anyone's actually looking at that handle. I left in disgust, but I am on Blue Sky. And so I'm here to introduce a bit about the field of philosophy of education before our two main speakers do their thing. And so I'm a lecturer in philosophy of education at the University of Birmingham. And philosophy of education is a sub-discipline. It's a field of philosophy that is particularly interested in the conceptual and normative questions around education. And obviously, our question for tonight that's sort of guiding me is, why educate people? And so we've really got to have a very good reason for taking young people, putting them in a school or a classroom for a long period of time over many years. We must think that this is valuable and worthwhile. There must be a good reason for doing that. And of course, like a lot of things in philosophy, there are a few different answers given to why we should educate people, or what the main aim of education is. And philosophers, of course, disagree. Now, my job, I'm not going to try and convince you of any one position. That's a different talk. What I wanted to do was offer you a few different positions as to what some of the philosophers of education argue that the aim of education is. And I'll also offer you a little bit of pushback on each of those positions. But the idea is that you can think about that for yourself and make up your own mind. So what are we aiming at when we say that we want all citizens to be educated? Is an educated person someone with a wealth of academic knowledge? Are they someone with the skills needed to earn a living and contribute to the economy? Are they someone with certain personal qualities that goes on to lead a flourishing life? And so we'll have a look at some of these different considerations. When you think about an educated person, or when you think that person's so clever or that person's so smart, what are things that pop into your mind? What is it that we think of that is the stereotype of an educated person? Is it someone with a wealth of academic knowledge? Is it someone with certain skills, maybe the skills to have a certain job, make a living, contribute to the economy? Or is it someone who has certain personal qualities, and personal qualities that maybe are admirable? So some of the different aims of education that have been argued for and defended in the literature, in the field. One is that education should initiate children into a range of academic disciplines. A second position is that education should prepare children for the jobs they will do as adults. A third position is that education should nurture in children personal qualities that they need to flourish, to live well. Another position is that education should shape children into good citizens, a bit more of a political aim. Fifth one is that education should equip children to think and act rationally, where reasonableness is the central aim here. And the sixth position is that education shouldn't have a particular predetermined or set aim at all. Rather, it should be responsive to the individual, to the needs of the child, and respond to their own interests and questions. So I'm going to look at each of one of these very briefly. So the first one, the academic aim of education, is the idea that education is inducting children and young people into a range of academic disciplines to try and get them to have knowledge. And the classic defence for this comes from R.S. Peters, who says that education is by definition a matter of transmitting knowledge, understanding and cognitive perspective. And that's best achieved by initiating children into academic disciplines. The academic disciplines, he argues, are worthwhile activities. So again, if we're putting children in schools and classrooms for a long period of time, he wants it to be something worthwhile and something that's going to be worthwhile for their whole life. He thinks that's academic disciplines. Now, his defence for that position is saying that these are enjoyable. So it's a hedonistic argument, saying that these are endlessly, richly rewarding and engaging. It's something that will never run out of things to think about. We could go our whole lives looking at something in more and more detail, as I've chosen to do with philosophy. I'm never going to know all there is to know. So he sees this as a positive thing. But what's the pushback here? Well, some people don't find academic inquiry endlessly interesting, engaging, and enjoyable. Some students don't like school, find it boring. That's not what they find endlessly rewarding. Peters also says that the search for truth, this academic knowledge that we're gaining, is a reliable source of pleasure. It gives us an enjoyment that can't just disappear or change. It's always there for us. It's our steady rock that we can rely on. Whenever we're worried, we can turn to a book. Have I convinced you? What's the pushback on that? Well, actually, things that don't last forever hold very special places in our heart. We love things and people and pets very dearly, and they can be incredibly richly rewarding and enjoyable. And, just because they don't last forever doesn't mean that they are not those things, and we get very attached. So that's the academic curriculum. The second position that I'm looking at very briefly is vocational education. The idea that the central aim of education should be preparing children to do the jobs that they're going to go and do. Now, this sounds a little kind of dull, but actually, if we take Richard Pring's approach, he says we spend so much of our time and effort and energy on the work that we do, and for some people, especially careers and vocations, that, this is such an important part of someone's life. And in some cases, it can really shape the kind of life you lead as well. So, he thinks that given the kind of job one plays does such a significant part in their life, it is the most important of all educational experiences in terms of the life worth living. So this version of vocational education is quite well fleshed out. He's saying that, you want to get children ready for the world of work that they're going to enter, but that includes thinking about the values of the work that they're doing, what kind of life that they will lead if they have that sort of job, and what kind of skills and competencies are required to do that kind of work. But of course, we can think of objections to this position as well. Which kind of jobs are we preparing children for, particularly in an age where people will change jobs and careers more than once? These days, how do we know which kind of vocational route we're going to channel children into? Isn't it better to actually give children a general education and then let them choose their own vocational path later? And the quote from John Stuart Mill, forgive the sexist language we can generalise to people, individuals are human beings before they are lawyers or doctors or nurses. And if you make them capable and sensible people, they will make themselves capable and sensible lawyers or whatever job it is that they're going to take on. So what we need from the university, this is his quote, is not professional knowledge, but that which is telling us how to use or direct that professional knowledge and bring a light of general culture to illuminate the technicalities of a special pursuit. So we need to make people good people rather than good lawyers or doctors or teachers or whatever it is that they're going to be. Which brings us to the third position, which is that we need to actually focus on the personal qualities that we're teaching young people. So this position says that we want to cultivate certain kind of traits in people so that they go and lead good lives. Now, on this view, instead of thinking about the content on the curriculum, we're starting with the question of what kind of people do we want children to be? And so this is a very sort of a different angle. It's had a bit of a resurgence of popularity in recent years. And so the idea of teaching personal qualities or even character education might be a term that you've heard floating around. So John White captures the sentiment of this position in this way: the educated person is someone who has come to care about his own well-being in the extended sense, which includes his living a morally virtuous life, this latter containing a civic dimension, among others. Whereas other recent accounts of him have made his possession of knowledge his chief characteristic, this one makes virtues more central. The educated person is a person disposed to act in certain ways rather than others, and so virtues like these, prudence, courage, temperance, benevolence, and other moral virtues, lucidity, independence of mind, wisdom, humour, and vitality are the hallmarks of an educated person. That's nice. We can imagine people with all of these virtuous qualities living their best lives. What are the objections and the pushbacks on this position? A more narrow version or a slightly different account of this one is also the idea of a citizenship education where you're trying to cultivate good citizens, which is a political aim. And we need to think about, well, what kind of citizens are good citizens, or what kind of personal qualities make for a good person? That might be agreed upon, but it could be slightly contentious, and it could be certainly contested if we're thinking about the city or the state or the nation that we're talking about. Are these personal qualities universal? Are they things that we might all agree no matter where we are, where we're living, at what time? Or actually, do we think that some qualities would be better suited for that place at that time? And so there might be a debate as to which kind of qualities we're referring to and who decides on those. Is it the government? And another important sort of pushback on this idea is, are schools the best place to be doing this? So some people might say that, it's the domestic space, it's your family and maybe friends or community, but that's where we decide which are the qualities we want to cultivate in people. Do we want schools? Do we want teachers doing this? As we might sort of think that these aren't the right places to cultivate the personal qualities that we're after. And certainly, even if we thought that they were, how does that translate to the curriculum? That's another big question. So who does the cultivating of these personal qualities, and who decides what they should be? So, okay, I've got another position for you to think about. What about rationality? Do we like this idea? Should we be focused on rationality? So Harvey Siegel, an American philosopher of education, argues the most basic aim in education is to make children rational. People are rational or critical thinkers to the extent that they base their beliefs, judgments, and actions on good reasons. So this might be the best thing that we can aim at. Critical thinkers are people who think for themselves, are suitably critical, independent in their thinking, and they're subjecting their own thinking and that of others to evaluation by means of good evidence. This is needed more than ever before. Some of the questions that push back a little bit on this position are thinking about what kind of thing we're doing when we're cultivating critical thinking. Is it a skill, or does it also include an attitude or a motivation? We can imagine someone who's a really good critical thinker but doesn't actually use that skill. We want someone who has this ability to also put it into practice. They want to be motivated to be reasonable, not just be able to be reasonable. Also, do we think that these kind of thinking skills transfer outside of the classroom, outside of the school, from subject to subject? How would we best teach it? Can it be taught in any subject, or should all children learn philosophy? We'll see later. The final position is going to be in contrast to all of the others, and it says that we've been presuming that we have some kind of predetermined aim, that we're sort of trying to push children or young people to become like this, when actually that's the wrong way of thinking about education. What we need to do is not have a predetermined aim. We need to be responsive to the individuals in front of us. This is very much aligned with the sort of approach of progressive education. John Dewey, American philosopher of education, who's been very influential, who says that our educational aims must be provisional, flexible, and organically connected to the circumstances of action. We can't decide them before we meet the individual in front of us and see what they're interested in, what they're good at, what they want to do. And so then that is a very nice position to have, but it would probably be a little more challenging for the teacher when you think about what are they going to do in the classroom, especially if lots of different people have lots of different interests, needs, abilities, which is obviously still a challenge that teachers face anyway. So all of these ideas are worth exploring in a great more detail. I did want to do a tiny little plug. I've got a brand new book. It just came out this week. It's newly published. Here's a copy floating around. If you do want to have a tiny little look at it, it's basically an up-to-date textbook because the readings were sort of a little bit old and stale, as philosophy can sometimes be. And so a couple of colleagues and I wrote this textbook that we use to teach the first year module at University of Birmingham, which I teach with Michael Hand. And so we've got a lot more detail on all of these different positions with some more contemporary examples and some more contemporary voices written in there. So that's just to get the brain juices flowing a little bit around the idea of aims of education. And I really look forward to the discussion that follows. Thank you.